Good morning. My name is Mercedes Caron from the European Forest Institute, and I would like to welcome you all to the sixth and last webinar in preparation for the Mediterranean Forest Week. The webinar of today is part of a series of webinars that are being hosted in preparation to the 8th Mediterranean Forest Week and are tackling the different topics that are going to be addressed during the conference. The idea of these webinars is to set the tone and start the discussions about the different topics that are going to be addressed, and later on are going to be complemented by the insights from the keynote speakers, the panel discussions, and the poster presentations. And all this information is going to feed into the roadmap that is going to be developed at the end of the week. The webinar of today is co-organized by IUCN and IMF, and is about innovative approaches to forest conservation, bridging science, practice, and communication. It will be facilitated by Joel and is part of the session about Mediterranean forest biodiversity. Joel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mercedes. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. So I'm Joelle Saleme, the Program Manager at the International Association for Mediterranean Forests, AIFM, and I will be one of the hosts today, together with Livia Zapponi and Rosario Calan from the IUCN Center for Mediterranean Cooperation. As Mercedes mentioned, so our webinar, this is our third and last webinar organized by AIFM and IUCN Med under the session 3 of the 8th Mediterranean Forest Week, where we will be tackling the Mediterranean forest biodiversity. Today, our speakers will talk about different approaches of forest management from a scientific to an applied and communication perspective in order to have to reach the biodiversity conservation that we are all aiming to. Before introducing today's speaker, we will share with you some information. This webinar will be recorded and it will be available on the Mediterranean Forest Week website in the section dedicated to the webinars. If you have questions to our speakers, please feel free to use the chat on YouTube, and we will be collecting them, and we will have a final Q&A session with our speakers at the end of their discussions. First, we're going to start today. We will understand how the microbial biodiversity of both plants and soil can support healthy forests with Lorena Gomez Aparicio. Lorena is a senior scientist leading the research group on Mediterranean forest systems at the Institute of Natural Resources and Agrobiology of Seville in Spain. She is currently working on the impacts of climate change and invasive species on plant and microbial communities of the Mediterranean forests. Lorena, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Joel, for the introductions, and thanks to the organization for inviting me. I'm going to share my screen. Let me see, wait. Oops, sorry. Okay, can you see now the presentation? Yes? Okay, perfect. So again, good morning, everyone. So I'm Lorena Gomez Aparicio from CSIC in southern Spain. And today I'm going to show you, or I'm going to talk about the preliminary results of a recently finished project, the SUMHAL project, titled Sustainability for Mediterranean Hotspots in Andalusia, integrating LifeWatch ERIC, which was a project funded by the Spanish Ministry of Science and Innovation through the European Regional Development Funds. And this was a huge project. Here you can see the webpage in case you want to check it out, involving many scientists from my organization, CSIC, with the main aim of contributing to the conservation of biodiversity in natural or semi-natural systems in the Western Mediterranean. And it was structured in many different work packages, approaching biodiversity from different perspectives. And today I'm going to focus on the work package 7, which was the only one focused on forests. And here is where I was one of the PIs. Okay, and more specifically, we focus on Mediterranean agroforestry systems, which are systems where trees have coexisted for a long time with human uses. And as for example, the Spanish dehesa. I don't know if you all know what a dehesa is, but it's a system of former forests where tree density has been reduced to allow the coexistence of trees with livestock grazing, like sheep, pig, cattle, and even bulls. And these systems usually appear in low productive areas, and whereas in the past they were considered marginal and susceptible of abandonment, they are now considered high nature value systems. And because of that, there is a huge interest in understanding their long-term sustainability, both by scientists and policymakers, because they can really contribute to achieve sustainable development goals established in international policies. And the problem with these systems is that when we go to the field, the situation is, in many cases, as this picture I show you here, of an oak dehesa in southern Spain, where we are seeing that trees are dying very fast. There is no regeneration. So there are no little trees that can replace the adult trees that are dying. And the diversity of these systems is very low. They are very impoverished because the silvopastoral uses of these systems that have promoted the eradication of basically all plant species apart from oaks and the pasture for livestock have conditioned this situation of very low diversity, and therefore there are no basically other good species that can replace the trees when they die. And what are the drivers of this situation? Well, there are many, but today I would like to highlight at least 2 of them: climate change and exotic species. I think that we all know that, that climate change is a huge problem, and particularly in Spain and in the Mediterranean basin, we are located in a hotspot of climate change with a clear trend towards drier conditions. So these drier conditions are imposing an additional stress on a type of system, the Mediterranean forest, which has been always limited by water. And another important driver of this decline that probably is not as well known as climate change are exotic species, and particularly exotic pathogens, because the Mediterranean basin is also a hotspot of exotic pathogens. As you can see in this map, where you can see how Mediterranean countries are highlighted in red and orange, which indicates that they have a lot of exotic pathogens in their forests. And the quantity of exotic pathogens has increased exponentially in the last years, in the last decades. And the group of pathogens that has increased the most are oomycete, which are microbes, very similar. Well, they share some properties with fungi, but they are not fungi. And I would like to highlight within oomycete the genus Phytophthora, because Phytophthora is a very important genus of plant pathogens. And in fact, in the Iberian Peninsula, we have a very big problem with one of these Phytophthora, Phytophthora cinnamomi, which is an exotic Phytophthora coming from Asia. And this species lives in the soil, destroy the fine roots of the oaks of Quercus rotundifolia and Quercus suber, and it precludes the tree from absorbing nutrients and water, and therefore causes the death of the tree. And here you can see the distribution of this pathogen in Spain. So it's basically distributed along the south and the center of the country. So this is a very important problem. Okay, so in this situation, within this framework of abiotic and biotic stresses that can interact among them to affect tree health, in the SUMHAL project, our main question or our main aim was to explore how we can contribute to conserve or to improve the health of these systems. And we focus or we use a system-based approach, which means that we believe that if we want to increase tree health or to conserve tree health, we cannot just focus on trees. we need to focus on all the other components of the system that interact with trees, because we know that interactions with other organisms such as the shrub understory, animals, or the below ground microbiome are going to determine the probability of these trees to grow, survive, and reproduce. So within the SUMHAL project, we specifically ask how we can, or what is the role of the biodiversity and composition of the shrub understory and the soil microbiome in tree health, and how we can manage this plant and soil microbial component to improve tree health. So why we think that we can improve tree health through management of shrub and soil microbial communities? Well, the main mechanisms I would like to highlight today is that we know, or at least in ecological theory has been shown, that diversity can protect against diseases. Okay, and imagine the situation of an exotic pathogen like Phytophthora cinnamomum that arrives in a forest. If we have a monospecific forest, as this case, where all trees are susceptible to the pathogen and the soil microbe is composed only of the microbes associated to this only specific tree, there is going to be a high probability for this pathogen to infect the roots of the susceptible host. And that's the situation in our dehesas, because this is the situation of our dehesas. We only have the oaks, okay? But if we have a diverse forest with different tree species and different shrub species, then dilution effects come into play, which means that for an exotic pathogens that come to the system, it's going to be much more difficult to find the roots of its hosts, like to find oak roots, and also this large diversity of microbes are going to be able to control, possibly in some way, the dispersal and the capacity of infection of the pathogen. Okay, so we wanted to test this dilution effects theory and to explore the importance of the diversity of the shrub and microbial communities for tree health in Andalusia, in southern Spain, and we designed this large-scale survey in the main area covered by the dehesas in Andalusia, shown in green in this map, and we sampled 30 different sites, all of them invaded by Phytophthora cinnamomum, but where the trees were showing very different degrees of defoliation. From some sites where the trees were still okay, fine, not showing no symptoms of decline, and other sites where the defoliation was already very high. And we sampled, or we recorded all these different variables because we consider that all of them can directly or indirectly affect defoliation. So our main aim was to understand the main or the relative importance of all these variables regarding the climate and soil properties, physicochemical soil properties, and our main variables of interest, the shrub understory and the soil microbiome. And well, here are some pictures of the fieldwork that we did, sampling plants, soils, roots, and analyzing the roots through molecular methods, metabarcoding, to understand the diversity and composition of bacteria, fungi, and Phytophthora in soils and roots of our oaks. And I'm going to show you some preliminary results here. I think it's very interesting. Well, I'm going to first tell you that to analyze all this huge quantity of data, we use artificial intelligence, specifically machine learning and random forest algorithms. And what these methods do is that they provide you the relative importance of all the variables that you analyze as predictors of the variable of interest. In our case, it was tree defoliation. Of course, I don't expect you to read this list of variables, not at all. I just want to show you that if we look at the top 5-6 variables as predictors of tree defoliation, it's very interesting to see that these top variables do not really include indices of taxonomic and functional diversity. They don't include richness, Shannon-Weaver, Pillow, Rauku, not for shrubs or for microbes. What they include is the composition of the soil and root fungal and Phytophthora community. This seems to be the best predictors of tree defoliation. So we found that healthy trees, healthy oaks, had a higher proportion of mutualistic ectomycorrhizal fungi in their soils and roots. Here, the healthy trees are shown in green in these scatter plots, and the defoliated trees are shown in red. I don't know if you all know what ectomycorrhizal fungi are, but they are mutualistic fungi, very important for oak performance because they provide water and nutrients, and also they can protect against pathogens. And we also found that healthy trees had lower relative abundance of antagonistic fungal pathogens in their soils, okay? So the fungi community seems to be very important. We can also go down to lower taxonomic levels and find also interesting patterns, like, for example, we can identify some keystone genus or species that seem to be playing a role, like the Trichoderma genus, which is a fungal genus very commonly or well known for its biocontrol potential. We see that the trees that show the lower defoliation have a higher abundance of Trichoderma in their soils. And also very interesting, we find that the healthy trees have a much larger abundance of native Phytophthora. Native Phytophthora are not as aggressive as exotic Phytophthora at all. So this healthy tree seems to have already a native Phytophthora community that might be in some way not allowing the exotic Phytophthora to establish in their soil. So it seems that these genus and species might be having some role in the control of the disease caused by Phytophthora cinnamomi, okay? And what about the shrub community composition? Well, our results didn't support what we expected. We expected to find lower disease incidence in the sites and in the trees with a higher diversity of shrubs, but we didn't find that, as you saw, that the diversity of shrubs was not included among the top predictors of tree health. And why was this? We conducted a greenhouse experiment, inoculation experiment with the pathogen Phytophthora cinnamomi to see if the main shrub species in Spanish dehesas are hosts or not of this pathogen, because this is an information that we didn't have. And what we found, unfortunately, is that most of them were hosts to the pathogen, as you can see in these graphs, which show the frequency of isolation of the pathogen in the roots of all these species, quantified both by traditional cultivation methods and also by molecular methods. The only two species that were not hosts to the pathogen were Phlomis purpurea, which is a lamiacea, and Retamas spherocarpa, which is a legume. Okay, the other species were all hosts of the pathogen. But the good news are that if we look at the quantity of the pathogen that we find in the roots of these trees, for many of these species is very low. So it seems that the pathogen can infect the root, but is not able to really reproduce a lot in the root. So these quantities are low for many species like fleshy fruit shrubs and species of the Lamiacea group, okay? So, well, maybe a conclusion, the easy conclusion would be to say, okay, so then we should plan, or we should facilitate the establishment of this group of shrubs in the dehesa, and we should avoid other groups of shrubs, like, for example, the Cistacea group, which is a genus very common in dehesas, which we see they are very good hosts to the pathogen. But the situation is much more complicated than that, because we also found that the Cistacea family is the only, or the Cistacea group, Cistus group, is the only genus that can provide a ectomycorrhiza inoculum to the declining oak trees, because they are the only species in the dehesa that share this type of ectomycorrhiza with Quercus. Okay, the other shrub species don't have ectomycorrhiza. They have a different type of mycorrhiza, which are endomycorrhiza, and which is not the main group of mycorrhiza colonizing oak roots. So Cistacea can be also good for oaks because they can provide this inoculum. And in fact, when we analyze using a different type of models, the structural equation models, which are also quite powerful to analyze big groups of data, observational data, when we use these models to explore these relationships among variables, we find that the Pistacia has a positive effect on trees, because when we have a high Pistacia cover, we have a positive effect on the ectomycorrhizal colonization of oaks, okay? And the higher the colonization of ectomycorrhizal in oak roots, the lower the defoliation. So even though Pistacia are good hosts for the pathogens, we are seeing that the net effect of Pistacia is in fact positive, because they are very good hosts also of mycorrhizal fungi. Okay, and so what are our conclusions based on these preliminary results? I think that we have provided convincing information showing that the soil microbiome plays a relevant role in tree health of Mediterranean dehesas invaded by exotic pathogens, and that this role is even more important than other abiotic factors very well explored in the literature as climatic factor or soil abiotic properties. Particularly, we would like to highlight the role of the fungi community and the oomycete, which seems to be more important in our forest than bacteria. Also highlight that there seems to be some keystone groups that might deserve particular attention and should be a priority when studying potentials for biocontrol and also for conservation of soil biodiversity. And we would like to also make the point that composition seems to be more important than diversity indices. And here I would like to make this comment about the role of diversity indices, because at least for forests, we have seen that a high diversity does not necessarily reflect a healthy forest soil. And I mentioned this paper that for me it was very interesting to read, which states that diversity is the question, not the answer, because we can see systems like this. This is a picture of the system where I work with in southern Spain, where you can see there are only a few trees because most of them are dead and have been replaced by shrubs. And if we look at the diversity of fungi and bacteria in the soils of healthy, defoliated, and dead oak trees, we can see that the largest diversity occurs under dead trees or defoliated trees, but never under healthy trees. And why is this? This is because the late successional fungal community in these soils for a healthy forest is dominated by ectomycorrhizal fungi. But for a declining forest, these ectomycorrhizal fungi disappear and are replaced by a huge diversity of saprophytic fungi and fast-growing colonizer bacteria. So having more is not necessarily good, okay? So we should be careful when using only diversity indices. We always need to provide context using information about composition and abundances. And regarding the shrub community, we would like to highlight that it's a fundamental provider of microbial antagonists and mutualists shared with trees. But we really need to take into account the high complexity beyond, associated to the effect of shrubs on soils, because the same species can be a good host of both antagonists and mutualists, okay? So we really need to explore the two faces of this coin. Which lessons we have learned and which are the challenges here? Okay, we think there is a huge potential for improving tree health through the correct management of soil microbes and shrub communities. But the challenge is that the information that we have is still very little, because the shrubs and soil microbes have not been treated as fundamental components of agroecosystems. In fact, shrubs have been usually cleared, and soil microbes, they haven't been that much studied. So we really don't understand very well their role, but we are seeing that they are important components of the system that we cannot ignore. We must integrate them in the concept and practice on forest conservation and restoration. And another important lesson that we have learned is that the shrub and soil microbial communities are linked. Not all shrub species are equally good for providing a beneficial soil microbiome. Okay, so even though the management of the understories is complex, we see potential for promoting healthy trees by increasing the cover of the right shrub species. And increasing the cover of these right shrub species, we are also increasing the abundance of the right microbes in the soil. And just to finish, I would like to highlight, okay, that we really need the shrubs in our oak forests and dehesas, not only because of the role that they play for soil macros, but also because they are fundamental to foster regeneration. I want to show you here these pictures I like a lot of. This system is one of the systems I work with in southern Spain, in the Cornocales Natural Park, where all the trees have dead, all the oak trees have dead. You can see here the only two that are still alive. The understory is full of shrubs. And if you look in the middle of the shrubs, you can see this little cork oak growing. Okay, so they could be the future for this forest. But we need this shrub to protect them from a herbivory, from insolation, and also to provide a healthy soil microbiome. And just, I think I don't have more time, but I would like you to check this webpage of this very nice life project, Life Scraps Net, because the main aim of this life project is, in fact, what I'm saying, to value the shrub covering the dehesas and to try to recover it, and also to try to make compatible the conservation of a shrub layer with the livestock use of these systems. And that's all. Thank you very much, of course, to my group, because they did a great job sampling the plants and the soils of these systems. And thanks to all of you for listening.
Thank you, Lorena, for presenting that your interesting work and for introducing us to the outcomes of the Somhal project. Now we're going to move to Turkey, where our next speaker will be presenting some forest management approaches presented in Turkey. Yildiray Lise is the current Deputy Director of the Nature Conservation Centre in Turkey. He is a biologist with more than 25 years of experience in nature conservation, sustainable forest management, and ecotourism. So, Yildiray, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joelle. I would like to thank IUCN and you for this opportunity, and good morning to everyone. Today, I will talk about our experience in terms of integrating biodiversity into the forest management in Turkey, starting with the biodiversity and now working with the ecosystem services. So it will be a snapshot of a 15-year of experience. As you may know, Turkey is a rich biodiversity country, hosting 3 biodiversity hotspots like USA, South Africa, and China. And within this rich biodiversity, the forest has a enormous importance, covering nearly 30% of the country, and most of them are state-owned, so private forest is very limited in Turkey, I may say. So the main organization managing and protecting and doing all kind of protection is the General Directorate of Forestry, with the different organizational chart. And at the smallest area, we have the forest management units that are run by the forest management plans you see on the slide. So there are more than 2,000 forest management plans for these units now. And we focus to work on that forest management plans by integrating the biodiversity values into these management plans. So as you know, as also Lorena mentioned, that the climate change is one of the important threats in Mediterranean region. So why do we manage the forest? Of course, the main thing is we always think about the timber production, but the last decades, the ecosystem services, biodiversity, carbon sequestration, and water has become more and more important. That's why we focused on these issues in the forest management in Turkey. So in general, since 2010, there is a ecosystem-based multifunctional forest management planning in Turkey. And with our support, we integrated the biodiversity into these management plans. Now we have, in the forest management plans, we have the economic functions for timber and non-wood products production. Then we have the ecological functions that the biodiversity and all the ecosystem services are located in there, and also the social cultural functions. That's the general system in Turkey, I may say, for forest management planning. Why we started to work on biodiversity and for the integration? We started that to define the forest stands specifically for the nature conservation and define the protective forestry practices for these sites that are reaching biodiversity. Also, put all this information into the forest management plans that are sure they are large plans like encyclopedias. So we have to put all our information into the tables and all the sections in the forest management plans. And also we share our information with the local forest teams to do capacity building. This is a key issue, I may say. I will also talk in the end. And what we do is that we want to do a cost-efficient work based on an objective criteria, and also based on zonation, since the management plans in Turkey are planned in zones. And also it will be a practical implementation. It can be applicable in Mediterranean, in north parts, in east parts, west parts. And also we focus both on species and ecological processes and habitats level. So that was the system that we created. We made a work with the experts to define the target species for our work for the whole country, for this all 30% of the country. The species were forest dependent, high conservation value, ease of protection, and potential for the whole to define the whole biodiversity. So what we focused on 6 species groups, I may say: the breeding birds, rare plants and rare herptiles, butterflies, rare mammal, small mammal, and large mammal species that we are focusing and doing lots of surveys and gathering the data, defining their distribution areas, and inserting the needs into the forest management plans. Of course, the target habitats and ecological processes are also important for us, like the old growth forest, I may say, or some water resources in the forest ecosystems, some specific stands with high tree diversity or rare or unique composition. So these are also our important biodiversity elements to be inserted into the forest management plans that we experience. So I may summarize the integration steps in 4 main steps. So we define the working area and do field work for these target species and the habitats that we define. Then do the analysis, lots of modeling there, and also using GIS and remote sensing tools also. And then evaluate the results, the draft results with the forest management planning teams and also the stakeholders on the ground. That's where the participatory approach is there, I may say. And then we define all the zones and come up with the recommendations and all the needs for the forest management planning to be inserted in the plan. And then it's approved and it started to be implemented. So what as I said, it's a zonation we create. So we have create conservation zones. So we have 2 zones, I may say, in practice. So one is the core zone, the strict conservation zone, and the other one is a limited application zone that we define. We prepare some guidelines for the forestry surrounding this strict conservation or nearby. So it's like a buffer zone, I may say. So we try to do all these zonation at the minimum size so that we will set up reach our targets. Also, it has to be compatible with the compartments management plans or guidelines in the forestry. Also looking for the agency of the nearby compartments, targets, and etc. And also it has to be harmony in general in the forest management aims of the forest management unit. And for the Mediterranean, we also cover the forest fire risk. If there's a risk, then we try to define different guidelines for the project areas, I may say. And at the end, we come up with some solutions for them. The evaluation phase, as I told you, is the participatory part that we discuss it with the experts, the forest local teams, and also different stakeholders like the tourism sector, agriculture sector, water sector, and etc., to define that kind of zonation on the ground, I may say. And as a result, we come up with something like this. So this is a forest management directorate having 6 different forest management units. So here we have 6 different forest management plans that we inserted this biodiversity into the forest management plan. It's from Mediterranean basin in the Mediterranean coast of Turkey. So there we have these green ones as the strict conservation zones and blue ones as the limited implementation zones that we prepare guidelines for the species or habitats there and define some kind of to do or not to do activities for the foresters on the ground. As you see, we try to do some kind of buffer zones and also use the natural corridors like the river basins or the canyons and etc. And it's all defined by the objective criteria. This is also another example from, again, in Antalya in the Mediterranean region. So you see there's a belt there. So this belt is like the transition zone from the lowlands to highlands. So there's a rocky area with also covered with forest, and upland is the pasture land that the nomads are using. So we created a belt to define the zones for the biodiversity values there. And this is from Erzurum, from the Caucasus spots. There we define, in the north part, you see a smaller area that define a buffer zone for a national park there. We have a nearby national park that we defined a buffer zone there so that it will be a good conservation output for us too. And this is an example again from Mediterranean in Muğla, like in the Aegean coast, I may say. So here we defined like an ecological corridors between the present protected areas in the north, upland, and in the south, nearby the sea. So the blue shows the migration routes of the wild goats in their migration time. So we set up an ecological corridor for the forestry works to be undertaken there. And as a result, I may say, till now, we have worked for more than 2 million hectares. And so I can say these two zones, zone 1 and zone 2, covers like more than 200,000 hectares in Turkey now. So you see in the Mediterranean, in the European part of Turkey, and also in the Caucasus region of Turkey, we have all these kind of zonation work. And all these guidelines are inserted into these management plans that you see on the right-hand side. And now they are under implementation. The plans are implemented in 10 years intervals in the productive forest and in 20 years intervals in some areas like the Caucasus region. And in these plans, we have inserted new information and data like the species information sheets at the end of each plan, showing the importance of the species and the needs in the forest, and some recommendations of forestry guidelines at the end, so that the local foresters may read and implement these actions on the ground, I may say. And we sum up all these experience into guidelines. They are in Turkish and also in English. I can provide the ones who are interested in. And then one guide for the planners doing the forest management planning, and the other one for the local foresters that are implementing these plans and doing the daily job in the forestry areas. The other thing is that we also start to work on monitoring in one of our projects. So we did regional trainings on forest biodiversity monitoring and try to create a guideline for the national scale. To show an example from the Caucasus region, this is a forest management unit plan that it's under implementation now. So we monitor the nests of the cinereous vultures, that each year they are increasing. So this is this area is under protection, and we see the number of nets is increasing each year since it's under protection. And also there are very limited forestry activities in this. You see there's a valley, so it's an important site of for us, and also shows the importance of our forest conservation management planning and also the monitoring. And the key thing is also, I would like to mention, is the capacity building. So we have done lots of trainings, meetings, produced posters, brochures, and films, as you may do also in all your projects, I may say. So this is also a good thing to do on the ground, I may say. And also we disseminated our work at national scale and also international scale through workshop. So on the right-hand side, there's a photo showing the workshop that we organized last year with the Azerbaijan and Georgian colleagues to see the opportunities for any collaboration for forest biodiversity in the region. So we are trying to create a project together focusing on forest management planning and also forest conservation, including the government bodies and also the and NGOs, I may say. And as a result of all this work, we also implemented our work in Kosovo, in the Balkans, in the Kosovo Republic in 2 years ago. So we did biodiversity surveys in one of these forest management units and integrated the biodiversity into these forest management plans and did some capacity building activities on the ground for the Kosovo Forest Agency and also the academicians and NGO staff on the ground. And then at the end, we developed a guideline for all Kosovo, what to do, how to do on the ground for the forest biodiversity conservation and also integration into the forest management plans. So this is our work for biodiversity. Meanwhile, we also started to work on ecosystem services. So as you may all know, this is one of the hot issues also in forestry sector for the last 10 years. So we try to work with different sectors and increase the cooperation of forestry sector with other sectors. And we did lots of effective stakeholder engagement so that it will be good for us for the sustainability of ecosystem services and try to enlarge the scale to a basin scale approach rather than just focusing on one forest management unit. And also we defined priority management objectives for each forest management directorate so that it's not just wood production or timber production, but we have lots of other ecosystem services that the forest ecosystem is really important, especially recreation and water provision. I may say these are the two pillars, especially for the Mediterranean region. So again, we established a system and approach and methodology, starting with which sectors are related on the ground with the forestry. And then we get information on the local level through workshops and meetings, collected data, field data, also do some kind of modeling works for the ecosystem services, and then prepare the spatial plans, maps, and integrated this into forest management plans. So we started with the biodiversity 15 years ago and now going with the ecosystem services on the ground, I may say. So these meetings are really critical because there we met with agriculture experts on the ground, tourism experts, and all other sectors, and defined the role of forest ecosystems specifically on the ground for agriculture, for pest control, for water provision, and etc. So it was there were very fruitful meetings, and we end up with good communication and results. Then we set all the modelings and field work to define that kind of maps for, especially for water provision and flood prevention of the forests, which is important in most of the forests. So, and then, as I told you in the biodiversity section, we inserted this data into the forest management plan. Just to show a case from here. Here, there was a dam, so the hydrological function was really important for the forest, and also the risk of soil loss and the ecosystem services for erosion control was really important. Static function of the forest, and especially for some trekking roads and cycling roads were defined there. And also for a sample case, we did an economic assessment of the ecosystem services to be inserted in the into the forest management plans for the first time in Türkiye. So what now we do, we work more for biodiversity and also ecosystem services in the forest management practices in Türkiye, I may sum up. And as a result, we prepared a product on forest products and ecosystem services, a planning tool booklet summarizing the works in Türkiye, the forest management and other land use sectors, and also what to do for enhance the forest management planning. And this work has made us to come up with another pilot case in Izmir, again in the Aegean coast of Türkiye, to work focusing on the hydrological functions of Türkiye, of the forest there. So we had two main dams there. So we work with the foresters to define the needs of this forest for better hydrological functioning of the forest. And convinced them to sell a mixed forest for the provision of water in the long run. And as a result, we defined again and produced a guideline that's now under implementation by the at national level, defining all the research for hydrological functions in Turkey and also globally, and giving the technical details for the planning of these functions in the forest, and some recommendations for planning and management phases and monitoring. Now, the General Directorate of Forestry is using this at national scale. After that, we have just started a new project focusing on ecosystem services and climate change. This is an EU-supported project that we run with the Istanbul Regional Directorate of Forestry and IUCN Urban Alliance, focusing on the forests of the metropolitan of Turkey. So this area covers like more than 600,000 hectares of forest, and there nearly 20 million people live. So we focus on forest ecosystem services, climate change adaptation, and also increase the capacity of the local communities and the community resilience. So in 1 year time, we will have the results, and I think the results of this project will also will be an important step for our work in forest ecosystem services. And lastly, what we have, as Lorena mentioned, climate change is really critical for Mediterranean region. And wildfires, as you know, are our main problem in most of the cases. And after the big fires in 2021, we have been working with FAO and other partners to define biodiversity-focused post-fire ecosystem restoration guidelines that we drafted now, and I think it will be published soon. So summarizing this good work, good management practices in Turkey and also Mediterranean countries, and having specific guidelines, biodiversity guidelines for some specific species groups, like reptiles, birds, and mammals, and also in general approach guidelines to protect the biodiversity after the big fires. So this is a project going on now. So the results will be soon published. And upon all these 15 years, I can say that what we achieved is really critical for Turkey's forests. So we defined zones, conservation zones in managed forests. So what we work in outside the protected area. This is critical, I may say. I created ecological corridors and buffer zones, as you see in my presentation in the maps, and developed the guidelines for the national use, did really good capacity building activities for central and local forest units, and also build the environment for forest biodiversity monitoring system. Now we have just started to do some pilot implementations, but I think soon it will be a national-wide system, and also shared our experiences in our countries. And the multiplier effect was that, so all our work became a key performance indicator for General Directorate of Forestry's biodiversity roadmap. So it was critical. And now the Directorate is using its own expertise and financial resources to upscale our approach in national level. You see that the number of work is increasing in each year. So this year it was like the work will be done in 10 different areas, and next year it will be more and more. And the monitoring was also key. As I told you, we are preparing the monitoring guidelines. This will be also an upscaling at national level soon, I think. So lastly, to summarize, I can say that the 15 years experience show that this is a long process. So we have to be patient and determined to come up with results for good results. And also the capacity building is the key, I may say, at the central and local levels, both for the forestry teams and also the local NGOs, and sometimes even for the academicians. And we have to create good partnerships, as I shown in my presentation. So I would like to thank to you and all my team that we have been working towards all these projects. So if you have questions at the end, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Yildiray, for showing us how you integrated the biodiversity and ecosystem services approaches into the forest management in Turkey. Now our third speaker will present the live GoProForMED project that aims to establish a transnational conservation strategy with close to nature models. Serena Corezzola is a technical manager and member of the coordination team of forest-related life project at DREAM Italia. She worked for several years on different projects focused on the monitoring and conservation of butterflies and saproxylic insects. So, Serena, the floor is yours.
So, welcome everyone, and it's nice to be here, and I will present this project. And so I'll go directly to the presentation. As we know, Mediterranean forests face many threats and pressures, and mostly due to climate changes, but not only. And in general, the overall conservation status of Mediterranean forests are facing bad or deteriorating condition. So the project, like GoProForMED, decided to focus on 4 forest target habitat, which are oak forest, cork forest, chestnut forest, and pine forest. And just focusing on 4 habitats, the project could have a quite relevant impact on Mediterranean forests, because these 4 habitats together are quite widespread and fairly distributed in the Mediterranean area. They have not a good conservation status, and they are still subject to economic activities and sensitive to management practices. So the main aim of the project is to enhance the conservation status of these 4 target forest habitats in the Mediterranean area. And it will be doing it by defining management and conservation models that will be applied extensively in these habitats. And another aim is try to establish a transnational and share conservation strategies among the countries that are involved in the project, and also support managers and foresters that work within the forest by spreading this approach through massive training action and supporting with tools. So in brief, there are 4 countries involved, which is Spain, France, Italy, and Greece. The 4 forest habitats are the target of the conservation action, and they will be implemented, they are being implemented in 12 Natura 2000 sites. The partnership is quite broad. The project, it lasts 6 years. It will end in 2028. DKM Italia is the coordinator, and there's a lot of participants that are distributed among technical, scientific, and manager entities. So this is the key action line of the project, that everything revolves around the definition and application of these models for the management and conservation of target habitat, in line with closer to nature forestry principles, but adapted to the Mediterranean area. So all the activity focus on support the application of this model by, for example, harmonize indicators, tools, approaches, and methods, apply planning procedures that can be shared and standardized, testing all these methods in the forest, and transfer the project results and approach in order to facilitate replicability through training and network for sure. So in brief, the key concept of the project is planning the forest habitats through 2 different levels of planning and the consequent interventions. So basically, there is a first level of planning that have the aim to preserve the biodiversity and all the key structural elements that can enhance the habitat functionality. And so in practice, the aim is to create, identify, materialize, and localize an ecological network that will be preserved. While the second level of planning and consequent intervention aims to give model of management of the rest of the habitat of the forest that can be for sure aim also at productive objective, not only for the conservation. And so this model in the rest of the area can be extended and replicated overall the habitat. In practical terms, as a first step, there's protocol. I forget to say that all these procedures are accompanied by a protocol, standardized, that now is in a draft version, but maybe the organizer could share it in the YouTube once this video is it will be published, because we like to have your read and opinion. We will be really happy. So everything I will mention is defined by protocols. So there's a protocol to define the core area, which are the best area that we found in the forest habitats, that they are considered biodiversity hotspot and have the function of allow mobile species to spread. And these areas will be permanently maintained and no intervention are foreseen. Sorry. Then the second step is to find biodiversity islands, so are smaller areas that have the aim to connect core area. And these areas can be managed because the aim is to create or maintain or increase the best elements for biodiversity in these connection areas. The third step is also to define and localize habitat trees that are trees that bear microhabitats and they are another node of this ecological network and enforce the connection between core areas and biodiversity islands. Another step is the characterization of the biodiversity island, because as long as they have been selected more with special criteria, we need to have data on them to understand their structure and their qualities and elements and their ecological value, because this will allow to plan which kind of intervention can be done in each single biodiversity island in order to meet the management objective. That are this one. So the general aims of intervention is to initiate or to consolidate process that can increase the function of biodiversity islands as stepping stone by try to achieve all the intervention objectives that you see here. So try to optimize the structure, the presence of very large trees, habitat trees, deadwood, and so on. So there will be a biodiversity island that have already all these characteristics, and so they will be just let free to evolve, while other could be need to be improved with intervention. And I like to briefly focus on the objective number one, so is to reach the structure of a maximal theoretical functionality. And I would like to focus on this because this is essential for all the other intervention planned for the biodiversity island. So let's start with a simple concept that the forest as a whole try to optimize and uses all the resources that can find, and like water, light, and nutrients, and these resources are finite. And so the ideal structure of a forest is the one that optimizes all these resources at its best. And this is reflected in the tree that grows, in the growth trees. So as you can see in the image above, each tree is, each circle is a tree, and the dimension is its diameter. And so a valid descriptor of the structure is the diameter distribution of trees. And this is important because with the collaboration of the University of Padova, the project, the university developed based on this distribution model. I won't enter in details about statistics, but just follow the concept. A model that can predict which is the optimal structure, potential structure of a forest. And so by comparing the actual structure with the ideal one, we can analyze how far the current structure deviates from the best one. And this approach is universal, is site and species independent, and is easily applicable to any forest. And so the project define the reference distribution, diameter distribution for each of the habitat type that are target of the project. And for each of, so this is an example of a site of the project, Montes Forest. So we can compare each biodiversity island, this real distribution with its potential one derived from the model. And that is important because give practical guideline on how intervene in each biodiversity island in order to act on just the trees that are categorized in the overrepresented diameter class, and not going to cut trees that are in the underrepresented diameter class. So just to explain, for example, if we have to increase deadwoods, for sure, comparing the real distribution with the potential one, we won't go to cut trees that are in the large or very large diameter class because are already underrepresented. So we will use plants for the category that is overrepresented. And this is true for all the other intervention objectives that we can try to reach in every biodiversity island. And finally, this is the second level of planning that, as I explained briefly before, has the aim to define and provide alternative and innovative models that are tested in plots of one area, of 1 hectare, and different models, different tests are defined according to different stand characteristic and fertility condition. And so afterwards, this model could be applied everywhere with that kind of condition. So where we are now, we are almost at the half of the project, and the, let's say, preparatory phase is almost concluded, and all the ecological network have been identified in all the 12 sites, and we are almost ready to go with the intervention in forest, and also to evaluate and monitoring the results of all these protocols, standardized protocol, to tune them up based on the results. And for sure, there will be a massive action of training. So for sure, in the Mediterranean area, we have to take into account the high fire risk. And that's why the project, similarly to the protocol that I have just briefly explained, provide protocols for both the level of planning 1 and 2, but with the aim of fire risk reduction. So there will be indication of measure for the conservation of the elements of the ecological network, or indication on where to locate them based on the fire risk of the area, and also intervention model of preventive silviculture that can be applied in area where the fire risk is really high. For sure, challenges is basically to move from theory to practice, because the aim that we want to achieve is to give really concrete practical, quantified indication to foresters and managers on how to intervene. And this is not really easy, starting from theory. I mean, there's lots of researches and scientific paper on every aspect of that wood and forest habitat, ecosystem, and whatever. But our aim was to try to define site-specific and habitat-specific measure in order to help people that then implement this action in the forest. And so this will also be supported by strengthen practical skill of these people through training. And so far, because the project is still at this half, for sure, we evaluate that long-term planning is really important, because to improve ecological condition of forest is something that have to be done step by step, and it needs to be planned, but having a long-term vision for sure. And another important thing is to involve local communities, because, for example, we had a site, Montes site in Sardinia, which is really, the forest is really, people are connected with it, are using it, are since lots of time, and they are really attached to their forest. So it's really important not to just go there and intervene without involve people, make them understand what we are doing, why we are doing it. So this is an essential point in order to have the results, the best results with their agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Serena, for presenting the work done under LIFE GoProForMED project, and we wish you the best of luck in the next phases of the project. Due to connection problems, our last speaker, Leila Rossa Mouawad, will not be able to join us live, but she have recorded her presentation. Leila is a researcher at the Nature Conservation Centre of the American University of Beirut in Lebanon. Through her educational background in forestry and current work in the environmental field, Leila is deeply committed to biodiversity conservation at the national, regional, and global level. With over 5 years of experience in forest communication, Leila actively participated in international events to represent youth and support scientists in effectively communicated their complex messages to a wider audience.
Everyone, my name is Leila and I come from Lebanon. Allow me first to apologize for having to pre-record my intervention instead of doing it live. But I'm sure you've all heard about the ruthless crimes happening daily in my country. I ask you to please keep Lebanon and all the innocent civilians in your prayers. Now I will just share my screen. Okay. So today I'll be doing a quick presentation about communication. And this presentation is not a workshop, but instead it's an opportunity for us to reflect together on why we cannot talk about forestry anymore without focusing on communication. Allow me first to take you back to spring 2019, when I was still in my second year of university studying agriculture, and I see this announcement. I went to the boot camp and also to the 6th Mediterranean Forest Week after it. And for the first time, this made me see hope in Mediterranean forests. I knew immediately that forestry is what I want to study, and communication is what I am passionate about. But what is communication? So communication itself is a field of study. One of its first models included 4 elements: a source, a message, a channel, and a receiver. This model is still valid today, despite the significant changes that occurred over the last decade in technological innovation, social media, artificial intelligence, and communication approaches. But why do we need to communicate in forestry? Through his mandate, Ban Ki-moon, former Secretary General of the United Nations, emphasized the importance of transforming complex and abstract global agendas into personal and emotional stories to engage people and inspire collective action for building a better world. Take the SDGs, for example. The UN was able to turn complex text that many of us wouldn't even bother reading into simple icons that young and old memorize by heart. This step has been instrumental in the widespread adoption and implementation of the SDGs across the globe. Can you please all take a moment after this presentation to reflect on how much we as scientists tend to complicate things instead of simplifying them? Another quote is from Sir David Attenborough, BBC broadcaster, biologist, and natural historian, who stated in his very first video on Instagram that saving our planet is now a communications challenge. So following many years of unheard messages about forests, it is time for forest communication to break through and make the message heard within and beyond the sector. In short, besides saving our planet, as Sir David Attenborough said, communication is essential to bridge the gap between the scientific community and the general public. This will help in making research more relatable to non-experts, and will also help motivate people to take action and inspire the next generation to join forestry. So here we're talking about keeping people connected to forests. And lastly, it will help unlock new funding opportunities by shedding light on the many benefits of investing in forestry. However, nothing comes without its challenges. The main challenge today is for scientists to develop messages that cut through the information clutter. Given the abundance of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, trusted experts like you need to communicate and get your message across. We all know that science and media do speak different languages, but scientists today have many tools that can be leveraged to get the message heard within the forestry sector and beyond. Okay, so by now, I think you must be wondering, how can scientists communicate effectively? Luckily, tips on communication are not new. Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher, left us way back with a toolkit on effective communication. The trinity of ethos, pathos, and logos. This means that any communication should be credible, invoke emotions in the audience, and construct a logical argument. In short, good communicators make you trust, feel, and think. Today, anyone with a phone is a communicator. What matters most for us to convey our message is to ask ourselves these key questions. First, what are my goals? Do I communicate to share my knowledge, or do I want to provide a solution to a certain problem? What exactly is my purpose? Second, who are the audiences I would like to engage? What are their concerns and values? What do they care about? And lastly, what message do I want to convey? So what you should take into consideration when crafting your message is to first make it short. Research found that simple messages enter the brain quicker and stay there longer. Additionally, the attention memory threshold of audiences is 2.5 seconds only. This means that as communicators, we have a very brief window to capture the attention of audiences and to make an impact. Second, make it accessible. And here I'm not just talking about accessibility to people with special needs. Effective communication requires overcoming language barriers and ensuring that technical jargon is translated into layman terms while maintaining scientific accuracy. As such, complex ideas need to be broken down into simpler ones. Third, emotions. And I'm sure that many of you might find this very weird because we're so used to science being entirely objective. but emotions do play a big role in forming thoughts, behavior, and actions. When choosing emotionally charged words, we can create a more profound connection with our audience. And lastly, stories. Throughout human history, storytelling has been the most powerful tool for learning. Just think about the tales and myths and stories that we have been passing on through generations. Stories have the power to grab the attention of an entire audience. It's important, however, to note that people tend to react more to a positive rather than a negative narrative, because this empowers them to take action and drive change. Okay, so once you have your message, where do you disseminate it? Of course, we're here not talking only about scientific journals, podcasts, and traditional media such as television, radio, and newspapers, because these are definitely important channels. But another even more important channel today is social media. The younger generations, which I belong to, rely heavily on social media as our primary source of information. And today, more than 5 billion people use social media. This fact highlights the importance of having digestible scientific content on these platforms. And another good thing about social media platforms is that they allow you to reach a broad audience in real time. What matters most is that you choose the right platform, create the perfect message to deliver to the right audience. And this way, social media can become an ambassador for your research. I'm sure some of you might be wondering about artificial intelligence by now. So today, AI is set to revolutionize science communication. It can help us make scientific knowledge more accessible, engaging, and influential. Here's a quick example where I copied the content of the European Forest Institute's Mediterranean Forest Research Agenda and prompted ChatGPT to create a caption to communicate the message on social media. In seconds, ChatGPT turned a 36-page document into a small paragraph that can be pasted on any platform. Now back to my personal story. I'm sharing resources that I contributed to, and these are resources about forest communication. And I'm sure that you could benefit from. So first, there's the IUFRO Communicating Forest Science Manual 2024, which is available online. This document provides guidance and case studies for forest communicators. It has chapters on communication strategies, new media, media engagement, and even forest psychology and much more. And for resources focused on the Mediterranean, there's also a chapter in the Unisilva 255 issue. This one is more focused on the power of communication in forest restoration. It includes sections on challenges, strategies, success stories, and best practices. One key point I would like to end with is that collaboration among forest scientists and communicators yields a more significant impact. In 2013, FAO established 6 networks of forest communicators. In the Mediterranean and Near East, the Forest Communicators Network is led by Patricia Sfer, also from Lebanon, and it includes currently more than 120 members from over 16 countries. The network operates through volunteers who are passionate about forests and serve as messengers of information about forests from and into the region. The Forest Communicators Network for the Mediterranean and Near East is also officially responsible for facilitating communication during the Mediterranean Forest Week, and I invite you all to connect in case you're interested in volunteering. This is it from my end. I thank you all for listening and hope that this presentation was not boring. I hope that it makes you reflect on your own and your organization's communication and the impact that you're making for our forests. Should you have any questions or points of discussion, please do not hesitate to reach out on any social media platform, and you also have my email on the official website of the Mediterranean Forest Week. Thanks again.
So thank you, Leila. Leila was able to join us to answer your questions. Now we were gonna go to the Q&A session with Livia.
Thank you, Joelle. So we have several questions for our speakers today. So I guess we will start with Lorena. So according to the results of the SAMHAL project, how can we manage soils in practice to improve forest health?
Yeah, that's a great question, because forest is a question of a scale. So forests are huge, as you can understand. And when we think about forest management, conservation, and restoration, we are talking about large, very large scales. And it's very different to the restoration of agricultural soils. Most of our knowledge about soils and how conserving and restoring soils come from agriculture. And there, the approaches are very different, I think, to the ones that we should use in forests, because the scale is much smaller, right? So I think, I mean, there are many different ways we can approach the restoration of soils, but I think that the indirect ways of approaching these soils means that we are not focus our actions in, for example, if we want to increase soil biodiversity, microbial biodiversity, adding inoculums, right? That's difficult at the scale of a forest. But doing things like, for example, improving the cover of plants that we know that have beneficial effects on soils, for example, improving plants that we know that are barriers to the spread of pathogens, or that can provide inoculum to our trees, I think that's the best way to approach the restoration of healthy soils in forests, at least at the scale that we need, because it's easier to conserve the understory, much easier than to start using these biotechnological approaches with these little bacteria that you want to add to the soil and things like that. I don't think that's gonna be that much successful, and I think it's going to be much more expensive than just conserving the species that we have, and also maybe planting the species that we know that can be beneficial, and not only focusing on soils, but also in the case of the ESAs, in this live scraps net I told you about, we are trying to identify the best shrub species for multiple services, like, for example, those shrub species that are not the good hosts for pathogens, can provide mycorrhiza, are good for pollinators because they produce a lot of flowers. They are of high quality for herbivores, for the livestock. So I think that we need to think more about these indirect ways of conserving and restoring soils, and not that much of developing very fancy biotechnological approaches, because maybe it's not necessary.
Thank you very much, Lorena. So we have a couple of questions on conservation zones for Yildiray, but I think it's a topic that maybe Serena, at the end, maybe you could add something about the perspective from GoProForMED. So people would like to know if there is a minimum size to reach the conservation targets, to conserve the target groups, and if these zones will have a legal protected status.
Thank you for the questions. So I forgot to mention that we set the targets for species and habitat needs at the beginning. So, and then come up with some results. So in general, I may say that for the Forest Management Directorate that we are working, and I showed the map. So we normally have almost 3% for the strict conservation zone, and so 6 to 7% for the limited application zone. So it makes like 10% with the strict zone and also the buffer zone, I may say. So this is the general attitude that we are focusing. Of course, in some forest areas, we have more protection size, legally protected areas like nature parks, national parks, or gene conservation zones that are outside our focus area. So we focus on the managed forest. So in most areas, we have already gazetted protected areas. So I think Bruno Fede had a question there for this legal part of the conservation zones. So these are just in the forest ecosystems, and we integrate them into the forest management plans. They are not like legal gazetted protected areas in the IUCN terminology, I may say, but they are protected for under these forest management plans. And district zones, there are no forestry activities. And for limited application zones, there are specific guidelines that the local foresters are implementing on the ground. And now with the General Directorate of Forestry, we are working on a regulation for some specific actions to do or not to do at these conservation zones. And I think by the next year, we will have a legislation or a regulation specific for our conservation zones in forest ecosystems in Türkiye. Thank you.
So Serena, maybe would you like to add something about how did you establish the size for your biodiversity islands?
Yeah, so we decide for core area that the biodiversity hotspots that are kind of your protected zone, a minimum surface of 5 hectares, but you can choose more than one core area. And for the biodiversity island, a minimum size of 1 hectare, minimum, but try to the overall surface of the entire network covering the 5%, sorry, of the entire habitat surface. So we know that it could be even more, but we try to compromise with the necessity that this model could be implemented also in private forests, because for sure our project deal with protected areas, and so it's easier to save forest patches larger and not use them for production. But our aim would that this model could be applied even in every kind of forest. That's why we try to limit this surface.
Thank you, Serena. We have so many questions, but we're running out of time. So a question for Leila. So what is, in your opinion nowadays, the role of traditional media in forest communication?
Thank you, Lydia. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So today, traditional media remains essential because it has its own audience, especially in regions with limited internet access in rural areas. So TV and radio mainly can reach rural areas and older generations as well, who may not be active on social media and on the web. So these platforms have as well established a certain level of credibility, because I see that many people do not trust social media, but they do trust what they see on the television, because they're perceived as more regulated, and there's always fact-checking happening before something is out on television or on the radio. So they're mostly seen as trustworthy sources. I would suggest that a balanced strategy, which includes both social media and traditional media, it would ensure a wider reach for anyone trying to communicate.
Thank you. I'm afraid we're running out of time, so I give the floor back to Joëlle.
Yes, thank you, Olivia. So just to end up our webinar, I would like to thank all our speakers for their intervention and for sharing their successful initiatives. We really hope that you will be able to join us in Barcelona or online for the 8th Mediterranean Forest Week. And please don't forget to visit the Mediterranean Forest Week website at www.mediterraneanforestweek.org. See you in Barcelona.
Bye.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.